everybody has that mindset of this is how it's always been, so let's just do it that way. And that's not what's serving us, right? And we know that because we're seeing more people, thank goodness, right? We are seeing more people reach out for mental health, for help and assistance, which is amazing and perfect, right? But it used to be so stigmatized. I'm doing air quotes. It used to be so stigmatized to even think about that, right? Or to even mention that.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming back for another episode. Today's guest is Donna. She is a 20-year combined federal service veteran as a registered nurse in both the Air Force and the VA. Her husband is also a Navy CB veteran. She has 2 kids in their 20s, 2 rescue dogs, and is a huge Harry Potter fan. Now working in the medical field as mental health nurse. And I'm really excited, Donna, to have you on the show today and have this open discussion about mental health, hear your story and everything you have to say.
Thanks, Rach. I am so excited to be here. This is somehow we connected and it was like kismet because this really, I think, just rolled right into my wheelhouse. I think I've been preparing for something like this for a long, long time.
I love it. I truly believe in these divine connections as well. And, right place, right time. And so I love that you are so in the mental health space. And I always love connecting with people that are just as passionate about this as I am. So I'd love to just hear a little bit of your background, your story, where you got to where you are today, and then we'll just take it from there.
Awesome. Yeah. So my background is longer than yours. I'm a little bit older, been around for a while. I was born and raised in New York City. So was a city girl for a long time. Grew up there, went down to a small town in Florida, ended up having some of that small town life, a little bit of discrimination because I was a big city girl in a tiny town. So I had to deal with that. Matter of fact, no one ever called me Donna. My whole time in high school, they called me Yankee. It's like, okay, fine. Very discriminated against when I had friends that were not of the same race as me, or if I reached out to people who were not the same as me because of the small town mentality. So I had to deal with that, but eventually moved on, right? Went into the military. I was active duty Air Force for 4.5 years and I went in as a registered nurse. So my senior year in high school, I got my CNA, and then I got an EMT, and then an LPN, and then got my RN. And after my RN, I went active duty. So I went in as an officer and really loved it. Loved the military. Met my husband in there. He was a CB. We were down in Biloxi, Mississippi. So I was at Keesler. He was on NMCB 7 down there, and we met out dancing one night. So it was great. The thought is that he would get out and I would stay in. So that's what we did. He got out after 4 years. I stayed in, and then President Clinton decided, well, we don't need as many middle people. We don't need as many nurses. And I got rifted, and it was like, are you kidding me? So, 2 years later, they called me back and they're like, oh no, we need nurses now. And I was like, I'm having babies now. Sorry. Like, you missed your opportunity. I was the golden girl. I would have stayed forever, but you know how that goes with the military. Anyway, so looking forward now, I've been a nurse for 40 years. Well, healthcare for 40 years, an RN for 30. And I have historically been ICU ER. So I've been on the hot shit side of keeping people alive and making sure and seeing mental health issues from the emergency room side and from, people being in the ICU. And then I slowed down a little bit, went back to the VA so I can finish out my 20 years. And in the VA, I've done 8 years of outpatient psych, which was great because it gave me amazing insight into, kind of where some of our brothers and sisters are getting caught up and what's going on and how things build on each other. Because I'll tell you, when I was active duty, I had a few issues here and there. I ended up in a group here and there, but I didn't realize that a lot of that was kicked off by my upbringing and not necessarily from what was in the military. So it's the baggage that we carry with us into the military, and then it's just compounded when we're in there. So I still, at the moment, I'm working at the VA. I'm still serving. I'm a complex case manager right now at the VA. So all those vets that are kind of slipping through the cracks, I deal with a lot of the 80, 90. In fact, I just signed up a 101-year-old guy the other day. So I'm kind of making sure that they're getting all the things that they need from the VHA, from the hospital administration side. I don't do anything with the benefit side, but I make sure that they're getting the things that they need. You know, if they need to have a home health nurse, if they need to be in psych and they haven't got hooked up yet, I get to do all that and help them out. So it's pretty cool. About 4 years ago, I started a health coaching business, because I think as I go through this journey, I've learned that, and you hear this all the time, but people don't really get it, that we are not one component, right? We are not our anxiety. We are not our Crohn's disease. We are not any one thing that people label us with, right? We're a whole entity. And as a health coach, I get to address all of that, because it's amazing how much your diet and your sleep and, you know, just things like that really affect everything in your life, especially your mental health. So the gift that you're giving me to be able to be, you know, a guest on this podcast and to really reach out to people and be like, hey, let's see what else we could do, right? Because going into a psychiatrist and getting a pill, or going to a therapist and doing therapy, is not the whole picture, right? Nobody's going to fix you but you, right? Those components are going to help, but you've got to be proactive in who you are. You've got to be proactive in your own health. And I think that's a piece that we miss. I think our society doesn't show that as much. It's not that we are neglectful. I think that we have not been taught that. So yeah, oh my gosh, I've been rattling for, for a bit. I hope that's good.
No, you're good. I think you bring up so many great points here. And, you know, I truly believe that the military, especially the active duty component, should really focus on mental health a lot more. And I love that you bring up that it's so much more than a pill, because I think when our higher ups in DC think about, providing mental health services for an entire DoD organization, they're thinking, oh my gosh, we have to now hire X amount of therapists, X amount of psychiatrists, do X amount of this, X amount of that. But all it comes back to is just basic well-being, right? How are we eating? Most of the military members are eating like shit. How much rest are we getting? Understandably so. You can't always have your 8 hours of sleep every night. You can't control everything, but are we making sure that we are taking care of our service members' well-being? And I would have to say that I don't think that the DoD organization is. And I think that there are tiny attempts here and there to save face, if you want my honest opinion, to save face, to make it look like they're trying to.
I work for the VA. Trust me, I know all about that. Yeah.
I mean, are there certain patterns that you see with these people that you are seeing it from like a psychiatric perspective that you think would really make a difference if the military focused more on being proactive?
Definitely. I could never say no to that, but yes, definitely. But I think it starts even before then, right? I think, a lot of our military raised military. So I don't think that our forefathers who were active duty, or people who are active duty now with children, are actually getting out there and saying, I did it this way. It was taught to me this way, but this might be better, right? Everybody has that mindset of this is how it's always been, so let's just do it that way. And that's not what's serving us, right? And we know that because we're seeing more people, thank goodness, right? We are seeing more people reach out for mental health, for help and assistance, which is amazing and perfect, right? But it used to be so stigmatized. I'm doing air quotes. It used to be so stigmatized to even think about that, right? Or to even mention that, or to, for some guy who's going down in a submarine or something, and to think about that he might have claustrophobia or be anxious about being, around that many people in such a tight space. It was like, suck it up, dude. This is your job, right? This is your MOS. You got to do it. So I think, yes. Are there patterns and things that I see in the military? Yes. And do I see a lot of things through the VA that just make me freaking crazy? Yes. I love the VA. Don't get me wrong. I think we do a fabulous job. I think those people in the trenches, the people who are actually working for you, the docs, the nurses, the therapists, all those people are doing an amazing job. The problem and it's with any bureaucracy, right? We see it in the military, we see it in the VA, we see it in our government, is as you go up the chain, that's where things foobarb, right? Everything gets fucked up as you go up higher. And, especially when we have Congress changing all the time, right? We'll fund one thing in the VA and we start down this path and it's like, say yes to the vet and make sure the vet's getting this and that. Well, 6 months later, there's a new proposal and say yes to the vet just went out the window. Now we got to start this new thing. It's like, come on, guys, this is, so I think when we look at military mental health and when we look at VA mental health, we have to realize that we're dealing with a bureaucracy, but it's not the bureaucracy's responsibility to take care of me. It's my responsibility to take care of me and to use the tools that the bureaucracy can give me, and to be able to speak out. So I'm hoping that that's what we really do here, Rach. I hope that we, are helping people to empower themselves to take care of all those things that they can, right? They can't take care of everything, right? They can't order their own pills, but they can do, like you said, right? They can do their nutrition. We can work on sleep. I teach a sleep class. One of these days we could do an episode just on sleep. I mean, we totally can do something like that, but you've got to step up and be proactive for you and then just pull those resources.
I agree with you 100%. One thing that you mentioned, and we talked about a little bit before this episode, is how you noticed that a lot of your things when you were active duty came from before the military. And I think that can be said for so many people. I have this theory, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast a few times before, but I have this theory that most of the people that come into the military are broken in some way. I know for me, a lot of my underlying reasons for joining the Navy were an escape, right? Like I lived in the Midwest. I wanted to get out of there. I had just gotten out of a really toxic 3-year relationship a few months prior. And it was like, here's this window of opportunity for something different. I think some recruiters really capitalize on that. And,
totally agree.
A whole different story to talk about because of the kinds of people that you see in the service. But there really is this, I guess, this fine line where, we're not really psychiatrically testing service members prior to coming in. I think if they did more in depth, they probably wouldn't have a lot of people join because I think a lot of people don't realize the traumas they're bringing in. Now, do I think that having a mental illness disqualifies you from serving? Absolutely not. I think that there are people with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. They serve honorably. They do a phenomenal job. They've learned how to make these challenges work for them because I am such a believer that you can make anything in your life work for you. It might be a little more challenging for some than others, but you can make it work for you. So no, I don't think that depression and anxiety should be red line disqualifiers. However, I think it goes back to like knowing yourself, understanding that, hey, I think I might have depression or anxiety. I'm joining an organization where I'm about to experience a lot of changes all at once that may trigger me. So having that awareness, I didn't have that awareness going in. And so I think a lot of these service members, when we're seeing these mental health issues compounding and stacking, I think it's just that, maybe they didn't quite have an idea going in. And then we experience changes, which can trigger things. And then some people experience actual traumas, which can trigger more things.
I totally agree. I don't know, right? Because we're ever-changing beings. So I don't know that at any one point in someone's life, you could test them for mental health or see if they have it, because you may have depression during this season, but the rest of the year be fine, right? You may have something during this time of the year and then the rest of the year be fine. So I don't know that a broad testing for me, I totally see your point and I totally understand what you're saying. I think maybe that we do boot camp different. I think maybe when we find those people that want to come into our military, because you're right, everybody's a superstar. The fact that you signed on that line means you're amazing, right? The fact that you stepped up and said, I'm going to do this. I don't care if you served, if you're a wartime veteran. I don't care what kind of veteran you are. You are a veteran. That's what matters. You signed that piece of paper, just like the guy that went and lost his leg, God forbid. But you're no different than he is. But I think what it means, and when I look at overall health, what it means is when you come in, we need to equip you better. We need to give you the tools better to be able to deal with that when shit goes sideways, and not try to fix it after the fact. Maybe give you some buffers and tools to deal with it before it happens.
I love that. This is why I love having these open discussions, because now we have this other perspective, and something that, I think it's important. It's so important to equip service members, but it kind of goes back to this old school mentality of, this is how boot camp should be. Now, I did read online the other day, I can't confirm that this is true, but I read online that they're teaching coping mechanisms and ways to deal with stress in boot camp. I want to verify that with someone to see if that's actually happening, or if someone just put that out just to put that out.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening, but
I couldn't speak to that. I don't know for sure. I mean, you hear how boot camp has gotten kinder and nicer, right? I mean, I hear from my friends who were in the military years ago, right? They're like, oh, they're so soft on these kids. They have a timeout room. They get to, walk away from their TI when they're getting yelled at. I'm like, okay, let's just step back for a minute, because some of that's needed. Rachel, have you ever heard the analogy of a steel bar? Like if you have a steel bar that's bent, and let's say it's bent, downward. If you want to fix that bar, you can't just straighten it up and bend it to a perfect level. You have to go all the way the opposite way. You have to bend all the way up and then bring it back down. And that's when it reinforces, and when it gets solid, and when it's going to stay and not have flaws in it. And I think that's kind of what we're doing, right? Yeah. I mean, you actually see that in our society today. I don't want to piss anybody off. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But this whole thing with the pronouns and everybody being identified as what they think they should be. You know what? I don't see this as a bad thing. Personally, I think some of it's a little ridiculous. I get very confused with some of it, but that's me. I'm old. I'm 58. It's going to confuse me a little bit. But I don't think this is going to be forever. I think this is society flexing up until we can find that norm, right? It was broken. It was, it was bent downwards. It wasn't quite right. It wasn't serving the masses. We're bringing it up. So right now it's serving the elite, and then it's going to come back down and normalize out. And I think hopefully that's a good analogy. Hopefully people can understand what I'm saying. I have no offense to anybody, but for me, just call me Donna. Don't worry about calling me any certain pronoun.
Yeah. To the boot camp thing, something that kind of came up in my mind as you were talking is that, I think that there's an area, like when we talk about getting soft, because you hear this a lot with the old school military versus the new school military. There are certain things that I think are absolutely ridiculous. Like, giving someone a ribbon because you're the top recruit, it doesn't serve you in the long run.
No, that won't serve you on the battle line.
Right. It doesn't do anything for you. But I think that the military still needs a certain level of hardness, for lack of a better word, because I think everyone goes into boot camp with an expectation that this is going to be one of the most challenging things I've done in my entire life. And when it does not meet that expectation, which for me, it did not, it sets up a precedent for the rest of the service, right? Because it's like, boot camp was like this, how's the rest of my time going to be? And it kind of regards the military as a joke. And so, but then I also think on the other side of things, we're not training leaders the right way. Correct. And when we are training TIs, DIs, RDCs, when we're training them to be a leader that yells at people and beats people down and doesn't teach them to be right leaders, that is your baseline for that person's 20 plus year career sometimes. Yeah. And that can be detrimental. I think that the military really, if we were going to focus on one thing as an organization, it should be building better leaders. And I know that there is an enlisted leadership foundation that has started up. I'm actually really excited to reach out to them and see if I can get them on the podcast, because I would love to pick their brain, hear more about what's happening there. But that's the only thing that I know of. Other than that, the only really good leaders that I've met in the military have been self-taught in some way. And it is, if you don't know the right direction to learn leadership, it is extremely hard to just learn from those around you, because a lot of people in the military, their idea of leadership is I yell at you, you listen to me because I hold a leadership position. And that is not leadership. And that will lead to poor mental health all day and a poor culture all day, every day.
Yeah. Well, habits feed habits, right? Old, bad habits, when you watch them, when you're fed them, when it's shoved down your throat, that's what you learn. You're not taught a lot of times in boot camps, you're not taught to really think for yourself. Matter of fact, you're told not to think for yourself, right? So you can't help it. I mean, honestly, these guys, some of these guys, and some of these guys who are coming in a little broken can't help but just adapt what's taught to them or what's shown to them, because that's what they're told to do. And they're trying, right? Some of these people are trying so hard just to please. And some of that comes from their background, right? Maybe they had a parent that was abusive. Maybe they had, so that's what they know. So if they're running from something like that, if they're running from abuse and things in their past, then when they acquire it or run into it in the military, it's old hat for them. So it's just the habit that they adapt. Yes, I totally agree. I think we need to, the kinder, gentler, you're right, has to start at the top, and it's got to come down. Now, in the same regard, I still believe that it needs to be a little tough, right? This should not be like a cakewalk. I mean, when you come into boot camp, you're training to be a defender of this country. You're training to be a defender of your family and my family. I mean, we are veterans and we have pride, and we're the 1% for a reason. So that still needs to be held, but finding the balance is where I think you and I are both speaking, right? Is finding the balance between that hard and the understanding and because you can lead with compassion and still be a badass.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just finished reading the book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I don't know if you've ever
it's a
read
good
that
one. Yeah, it's a good one.
And, I find it interesting that, he is the elite of the elite in the SEALs. And even he struggled with certain things when it came to himself and leadership. And I love how in the book he reflects on, I was so focused on being the best of the best and getting everyone up to that level with me that I forgot about the teamwork aspect of it. So you're right. There's this fine line where, you can create a bunch of badasses, but maybe they don't quite know how to handle their mental health. Or maybe we can create a bunch of people who really understand, self-care and all this stuff, right? But they don't quite understand the elite part, or the part where, maybe you need to flip that switch and forget about your feelings for the sake of the team or the greater good. And so I don't think the military has quite mastered that yet. And I hope that we're on the turn for the right direction in that. But I think at the end of the day, it really is going to start and end with the people more than it is the DoD organization. And so that's one of my major goals on this podcast, is not only to share these stories, but also to provide my listeners with value and tools so that they feel empowered to not have to rely on medical care, but to know that, you know what, I'm having a bit of a down day today.
Yep.
I know that what I need is to go on a walk. I know that what I need is a bubble bath. I know that I need to call a family member, or I just need some time to myself, and understanding that is 100% okay. And that these self-care things, which look a little different for everyone, do not encompass excessive drinking or smoking or eating a lot. And I think that's what a lot of people automatically turn to because that's what's comfortable. But I would love if you could just chat a little bit about that side of things, right? The health and wellness side of things, and some tools that people can use to really kickstart their own mental health care when maybe they're feeling a little off.
I would totally love to do that. We're going to do a whole series before this is over, let me tell you, because I'm sure we won't have enough time on this.
I know episode. There's so much.
I know there's a lot, but let me first say, because as I'm listening to you, right, and we're talking about military, we're talking about active duty. Now we're also going to address vets and people like that. But when you're talking active duty, there are moments that you can't walk away. You can't call a friend. You can't, so having those small tools, right? I know there's some guy out there that's going to roll his eyes at me, but deep breathing, right? Being able to stop yourself in the moment, take a freaking deep breath, get some perspective, right? You can't grow or move forward if you don't know where you are. You've got to take, a survey of where you are at the moment. So I've never been in a gunfight. I don't want you to, I've never been in a war zone. I was a medical military officer. So if you ever watched MASH, that, I never had to go to boot camp. My husband gives me shit about that all the time, that he had to go to boot camp and I was at MIMSO and had maid service. So he, but just know, after working with veterans and after being part of the military and seeing, all these people that I've come in contact with. I mean, I was over in Guantanamo. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember, but there was a time when Castro opened the gates back in the late 80s, early 90s. He opened the gates and people were coming over to the US on boats and inner tubes and everything. And they were coming from Cuba and they were coming from Haiti. And Castro literally opened the prisons and opened the insane asylums and told those people to get off the frickin' island or he was going to kill them. So they were coming along with all of these other refugees. So I was over in Guantanamo in processing those people. So that's probably the closest I got to war zone kind of things. But oh my God, what a wealth of information that I got. And sorry, I'm tangenting totally off of what you asked me to speak about. But I just want you to know, right? I don't want to present myself as any false person. I want you to know that I get that I have never been in a war zone. I get that I have not been under some of the stress that you guys have been under. I totally get that. But you can still breathe. I know that. I know that you can still take that 1 minute, right, before you line up on that target. And I'm sure and I know that you're taught this because my grandfather taught sharpshooters. Greg's grandfather taught sharpshooters. So I know that you got to take that deep breath before you pull that trigger, right? So, and that's what you've got to do with your emotions when you're in that right now stressful zone, right? You've got to take that moment, step back and be like, okay, fuck, I am right here and this is a shit storm, but I am me and I can do this. I've got my brothers around me. I've got my sisters around, like we got this, right? So that being said, not everybody's in a war zone either. So yes, you can still take a deep breath. Are there little tricks you can do? There are totally little tricks, right? You can go to any psychiatrist, psychologist. They'll teach you breathing methods. They'll tell you to do meditation. They'll tell you to do all this, try yoga. Okay, great. Well, can't quite do yoga in the middle, but like, so Rachel, do I have a minute to teach you a really quick tool?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So one of the tools that I teach, especially my anxiety people, my vets who deal with anxiety, is the 5 senses. So if you hold your hand up, you have 5 fingers, you know that there are 5 senses, right? There's hearing, taste, smell, touch, oh my God, and sight. So if you hold your fingers up, and the first thing I want you to do is pick any sense, right? So pick 5 things that you can see. You got 5 things that you can see. Awesome. Drop that finger. Pick 4 things that you can hear. Like what around you? What are 4 sounds that you can hear? Okay. Focus on that. You got those 4. Great. Drop that finger. What are 3 things that you can smell? Like, what do you smell? Do you smell fumes? Do you smell, the guy standing next to you because he stinks? Do you, like, what are 3 things that you smell? Drop that finger when you get those 3. What are 2 things that you can taste, right? Do you taste the toothpaste from this morning? Do whatever? And then the last one is, what is something that you can touch? What's a texture that you can touch and feel? If you take the time, if you take the few seconds that it takes to do that exercise, it diverts your brain from the anxiety loop that you're about to go into, right? Because if you don't do that and you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. But when you break in the middle of that and you do the 5 senses, it breaks that chain. It breaks that loop of anxiety. That didn't take us long, right? It didn't take us long. And please don't map it out like, oh, I got to do this, this, and that. Pick any sense, start with, I would not pick 5 things that you taste because I doubt that there's going to be 5 things that you taste right at that moment. But, start with something easy, like 5 things that you see or hear or whatever. But so that little tool will help break an anxiety reaction, will help break those endorphins and stuff that are going off, even if you use something as simple as that. And you could do that in place. You don't have to separate yourself from the world to do that. You can, and you don't have to hold your fingers. You can do it metaphorically, but keep yourself accountable. That's what's important here, is that you are taking control, right? When those thoughts come into your head, let them come in, say, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that maybe, this guy's going to punch me, but let me move on from that, right? But if you sit there and be like, oh my God, he's going to hit me. Oh my God, if I do this, he's going to hit me. Oh my God, he's going to freaking hit you because you're thinking about him hitting you. Like, take a minute and kind of refocus. And it takes a lot to be able to talk back to the voices in your head. A lot of us think whatever is going through our brain is our reality, and it's not. It's just a thought. I mean, we have so many thoughts throughout the day, and there's research, and I'm not going to quote things because as soon as I say a number, you're going to get a listener that comes back and says, she said there were 15,000 and it's only 16.2. I'm not going to go there, but there's a lot of thoughts that go through your brain, right? Every minute. You as a human being, and this is one of the most rare things that we have as humans, as opposed to any other animal on the planet, we could stop that thought and change it. Right? Oh my God, my husband's yelling at me. He's such an asshole. He's gonna do this, and he's gonna do. You know what? Okay, he's yelling. I'm gonna walk away. Oh, he's yelling. What is going on with him? Maybe he had a shitty day. Like, you have the ability to stop that. I used to precipitate on things from my past. I would bring up things back when I was bullied, right? I was a fat kid. I was a New York Italian fat kid. So I got bullied a lot. And now, right, I'm 58 now, but in my 30s and 40s and stuff like that, every so often my brain would go back to like 1974, and this person picking on me. And I've had to learn to be able to go, wait, what are you bugging me for? Like, stop. And then be like, you know what? Here I am today. I'm a mom of 2 kids and life is good. That shouldn't bother me anymore. But it's going to take practice. It's going to take time to learn how to do that. But just know whatever is happening to you at the moment is not what's going to happen to you the rest of your life, right? The wheel is forever turning.
Yeah, I love that. I think distraction realistically is the main point that I pulled from what you're saying. If you're in the moment, you're in the heat of it. Breathing doesn't work for everyone. I get that. I've talked to people before where they're like, yeah, breath work, it doesn't do it for me. Yeah. And, breath work doesn't always work for me either. But, I found, for example, when I was in labor with my daughter, I was in the car, my husband's driving me to the birthing center. I was looking at the vehicle in front of me and I just started describing that vehicle. I was like, oh, it's a truck. It's red. It has black tires. It's driving in front of it. Just the randomest shit. I was just describing. Right. When I stopped describing the truck, I started describing the light pole, the field next to me. Mm-hmm. Realistically, what you said with the 5 senses, anyone could pull anything from that and just focus on something, right? Focus on something other than what the anxiety in that moment is creating in your brain, because you're right. It's a story. Everything that happens in our life is our perception of it. And that's why it's so interesting when an event happens, how you get 20 different renditions of that same event, because everyone's just creating their own version of the story. And so I love that you brought that up, because I think it's something so valuable for the listeners to really reflect on and to think about in these stressful moments. What do I do? I can't go do yoga. I can't call a friend. I can't cry right now. Maybe I'm not comfortable with that. Oh, I can focus on something. And it sounds crazy if you've never done it before, but it's true. It might be weird the first few times, but it's kind of one of those things where you have to train your brain to do something different than what you're used to doing. We're always going to go towards comfort.
Right. You are not an anxiety person. You are a person with anxiety, right? The anxiety doesn't define you. It's not who you are, right? You are a person who occasionally has to deal with that. Surprise, most of us do, right? You are not alone on this planet dealing with that. It's crazy. And
I was going to say, because I know there's going to be a listener listening and thinking, oh, it's easy to say that when you don't have anxiety. I have anxiety, I used to be medicated for it. To this
Mhm.
day, I have days where I'm like, get me back on Zoloft, right? But I'm breastfeeding. So I'm like, that's the thing that kind of keeps me for like in trying to find these tools in my head that I can use other than being on medication, but also knowing that I don't want to be on medication because I want to be able to master my own head. But I understand that it is not always easy to do these things. Sometimes the brain is going so fast that you just have to do your best that you can in that moment. And that's okay.
Right.
If you try and it doesn't work and, you keep trying and you feel like it's not working, just keep going. Like, I think that's the best advice that I could give. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Donna.
So one of the things that I want to say for sure, and that you kicked off in my brain, is that this is why we talk about preventative medicine, right? Because when you're in the moment, when you're in that anxiety, you can't see it. You can't, until you've trained yourself a little bit, until you've done these skills and you're comfortable with them, you're not going to be able to pull them up when you're blacked out, panicked, right? When that fog hits your eyes and you can't see in front of you because of the anxiety, you're not going to be able to do this. This is where taking care of yourself, being responsible for who you are, practicing ahead of time so that you have those tools coming into that anxiety storm is what's important. And that's what I'm hoping Rachel and I are going to be able to help you do, right? We're going to talk about good nutrition, right? Sugars and fats and all this stuff that's out there in the world that society and commercials keep trying to shove down our throat is not helping anything, right? You need to get healthy. You need to keep your blood sugars at a nice level. You've got to make sure that your body's maintained because it's your tool to survive this world. I mean, it is the thing that you have control over. You have control over putting that food in your mouth. You have control over going for a walk as opposed to sitting on the couch and playing Xbox for 3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it might be uncomfortable,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there's no growth in the comfort zone. I love
No.
that quote. I don't remember who said it, but I love that quote.
That's true.
And I think a lot of people get comfortable and complacent because the military can become a very mundane lifestyle.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that all you have to do is show up to the right place at the right time and the uniform of the day, do your job, and that's all you have to do. But no, there's so much more than that, right?
But that's all you have to do for them.
Right.
That's not all you have to do for you.
Exactly.
And that's what people don't get. People, right? It's taking that personal responsibility for who I am. Unless you're learning, you're not growing. Unless you're doing something, you're not growing. And I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to get this. It took me till I was in my 40s to really get that I am responsible for me and that this is the one life that I get to live. If I screw this up and don't do the things that I want to do, right? When I was 55, I finally jumped out of a freaking plane because I wanted to. I had been wanting to for years and years, but I was too fat or I was too this or I was you know what? I got myself healthy. I was like, it's my 55th birthday. I'm jumping. And I did. And, but it's something that I wanted and not that was dictated to me, right? I showed up at work. I mean, I was a hell of an ICU ER nurse. Let me tell you, I could keep anybody alive. If you want me to dial drips, I'll dial drips all night long and keep you alive. But that was my job. That was what I was told to do. And I stepped up to that challenge and I did it well. I mean, I hope I'm not sounding like braggy or anything, but but I have pride in that, right? I have pride in what I did, but I was doing nothing for me when I was doing all that for everybody else. I have finally learned to incorporate the balance between taking care of others and taking care of myself, because if I'm not at my best, I can't give you my best.
Yeah. And, it's the finding your own identity outside of the job. A lot of us military members and veterans lose that.
Yeah.
And so I'm so excited that you were able to share some tidbits of information with our listeners about some tips and tricks and tools. And you're right. I mean, we're probably going to have tons more episodes just giving value to the listeners of what they can do, because that's something I really want to focus on is what tools can we give people so that they can be better. I truly feel that, not only knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is power. And so Donna, if anyone wants to reach out to you with any questions, is there some place where anyone can reach out, or is it better if they go through me?
So I think I gave you something to drop in the show notes. It's a JOLT form. It's a kind of generic health assessment that I send out to people who want to work with me. It's free, like it's not going to cost you anything. Fill it out. It gives me a picture of where you are right now, kind of what your goals might want to be. And then I'll give you a call and we'll talk about it. If that's too scary for you, reach out to Rachel, give her your name and stuff, and in a way that I can contact you. I'm on Facebook or whatever, and we can make contact. Like I'm not hiding behind, walls or anything. I'm pretty open, but I don't want to just blast my phone number over the podcast.
Fair enough.
Okay.
No, and the website for the podcast is www.ysdeh.com. The acronym for Your Story Doesn't End Here. And there's a contact form on there too. So if you're not comfortable reaching out to Donna through that method, or maybe you just have a question and you want to remain anonymous, you are more than welcome to contact me through that form on the website. And I'm happy to pass along any questions that you might have. Also, for those of you that are located in the Pacific Northwest, we are really working on getting a lot more physical mental health related activities and events going to just provide that support, mainly on Whidbey Island. But if anyone in the area wants to participate in that, just stay tuned. I'll be posting it on the various social medias for the Your Story Doesn't End Here podcast. And then we'll be advertising that within the local community on Whidbey and in Oak Harbor. So Donna, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show and to share value with the listeners. You're a phenomenal human being. I'm so excited to see what we're going to do together in the future. And you have my utmost gratitude.
Oh, Rach, thank you so much. I am so excited that you started this, and I'm so grateful that you asked me to be part of it. So yeah, I hope we do amazing things. I know we're going to do amazing things in the future. And I can't wait to meet some of our listeners and connect with them also.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.